if you want to generate buy-in, generate success in your career, you got to start forging your own perspective on things. And the number one enemy that I came across was imposter syndrome. Who am I to have a perspective and an opinion?
Welcome to the Happy Engineer podcast, the place where we help engineers like you to build your career, balance your life, and be happy. I'm Zach White, former engineer turned lifestyle engineering coach, and your host for the journey to the career and life that you desire. Hey, I believe that you shouldn't have to sacrifice your life to reach your full potential at work. And what we're going to bring you in these conversations and interviews are the strategies, the tools, and the mindsets that are going to allow you to experience both success at work and success at home. Hey, we do the best we can to keep this free from advertisements. Of course, I can't control what YouTube may throw up, but do us a favor and share this podcast with anybody who you think may like it. And don't forget to click the bell and subscribe and get notifications to our YouTube channel and for upcoming releases of the Happy Engineer podcast. I would love your feedback, and even more than that, love your story. Share with us how these strategies and tools are working for you. Would love to be in touch with you. Connect with us on social media. Find me at Oasis of Courage on Instagram, Facebook, or Zach White on LinkedIn. It's an absolute pleasure to serve you. Now let's do this. All right. Welcome back, happy engineers. I'm really excited for today's conversation with Guillaume Wiatr. He and I just met not long ago, and the work that he's doing as a consultant and leadership coach really struck me, and just pumped to get into the meat of this. But first, Guillaume, just tell us about MetaHelm, your organization, and what you do. Maybe set the stage for our listeners who don't know you and your work.
Well, Zach, it's a pleasure to be here. For our listeners, I run a boutique strategy consulting firm called MetaHelm here in Seattle. I guide business leaders, whether they are a CEO, a founder, a business owner, or an aspiring entrepreneur, to build a strategic narrative. And the result, the outcome of this work is to, from the get-go, or if you have an established company, is to create better alignment internally and outside your company. And most of all, to accelerate the adoption of new product and innovation.
So there's some terms here I'm so excited to dig into, specifically a strategic narrative. And the statement, I'm going to just read this because when I saw it in your bio and your work, it just captured me immediately, Guillaume. It was that business storytelling is dead. Build a strategic narrative instead. Everybody's talking about story. Storytelling is where it's at. It's a really hot topic. And then here you came along and said, business storytelling is dead. Let's aim at a strategic narrative. So can you unpack for us what is a strategic narrative and how is it not every other story and all this? I know there's a lot here. So just start taking us down that road, man. What is this strategic narrative?
Well, I've been helping my clients and business owners for over 20 years, doing what I just described: better alignment, acceleration of innovation. Storytelling came on my radar 15 or so years ago, and it really became a phenomenon. There's been countless books now written on this topic, and I got on that movement as well because I thought this was really, really compelling. And I think it is to a certain extent. But what I mean by business storytelling is dead is that I believe we have arrived at the end of the honeymoon phase of that movement. We're all excited about it, but I've practiced it for many, many years. And I came to the conclusion that it could be improve the way we approach it. It could be really improved for a few reasons. One, we think of business storytelling mostly as marketing. I mean, do the test, and I do that test every day. I teach a class at the University of Washington. That's the first question I ask in my introduction to my class. What is business storytelling for you? Most people will point to marketing, to creating a hook, just as if, people around were fish. But what if the fish is not hungry, right? And so we think about it at first glance as something magical that will come as a really nice wrapper around your business and make everything look much shinier and much brighter. It's going to make your marketing look awesome, really. But I think it's something that a lot deeper than that. Compare, where we are in the world of business storytelling and leadership to the first year of introducing synthesizers into music and bands. If you listen to the first bands trying to use synthesizers, there's some good ones and there's some pretty bad ones. And over time, we learn. I think bands learn what to do with this thing, what to do with this machine, and really discovered things you should do and things you shouldn't do. And I think that using storytelling in business is transitioning right now to that phase. First of all, if you have never thought that storytelling for your business or your career matters, I think you should really get into that question very quickly. It does really, really matter.
Yes.
Now, along with this journey, I discovered that one more story is not going to fix your career or your business. What's really going to make a difference is the narrative that you operate with. So I do make a difference between a story and a narrative. And I don't make this up. This comes from and pick up any good dictionary, you'll see that tiny subtle difference, except that I explored it in my context very, very far, very deeply. The story is a recount of events, in fact, that happened in the past. It's usually typically past, it happened in the past, even for sci-fi. It's things that could exist in the future, but it's been written in the past. There is a beginning, there is a middle, and typically we expect an end, right? Mm-hmm. Hollywood uses storytelling with that cycle. Joseph Campbell wrote books about it. Most books on business storytelling apply that same model, try to differentiate a little bit, but basically that's the big framework right there. Narratives, on the other hand, are open-ended. They have a beginning, they have a middle, but they have no end. Why? Is because a narrative is a modus operandi. It's the way you view something. So the definition of a narrative is a viewpoint, is a perspective on reality. And a narrative happens right now in that moment. Like you and I are having a conversation. We're recording a podcast. What's the narrative around podcast? I'm asking you this question, Zach. Why do we do a podcast?
Great question. So we have an intention to create a conversation that can be in service of some listener, somehow taking our ideas, our thoughts, our wisdom, our experiences, sharing them in a conversation that we hope will create value for someone outside of just the two of us.
Great. So that's the narrative right there. That's the narrative I share too. There is very strong overlap. That's why I thought coming on your podcast would be good. We share that belief. Yeah. And so we can now collaborate and we can produce something together. So narratives are at the heart of human collaboration because narrative connect to myth, to imagination. We aspire, we desire, you and I, in this moment, Zach, to create something of value in the future for someone when this podcast gets released. So we operate on a set of assumptions, we operate on a set of beliefs, that's our culture. And we don't even challenge those assumptions, right? We got to know each other, we connect through our digital media here, we record this, we create, so it all flows. So narratives are exceptionally powerful and important for any human activity because it reduces the level of stress in what we do. Now,
let me jump in. I want to make sure that I am following you. I'm as intrigued by this as I hope the engineering leader listening is, because it's the first time I've really unpacked it with you. Mm-hmm. This distinction of story being the complete container, the hero's journey, whatever loop we look at, recounting events of the past. And a key part of the definition is there's an ending, happy, sad, or otherwise. There's a point where that story comes to a conclusion. And the idea of narrative in general being that it's open-ended. There is no end. It's a viewpoint. It's a thrust. a
The
direction.
thrust.
Yeah.
I love
And
that word, thrust.
so in a way, the tense of the narrative is present with
Yes.
a look forward in terms of future. So the narrative is now, but leaving me to explore what's to come.
It's exactly right. So stories are great too. I want people to understand I'm not against stories. When I say business story is dead, I'm not saying don't do it. I'm saying do it smarter. Like
Yes.
understand what the difference more intentionally. Just don't stay at the shallow level here. So again, back to our own example here. Why do we believe in this narrative that podcasts are useful and that create value? Because we heard stories that happened in the past. We heard about that host, about that guest, because we were on other podcasts, and all of these come in as proof that this narrative is valuable. So that's until another narrative shows up, a better idea shows up. Who tells us that in the next 5-10 years, podcast is going to stay so great? And that's the nature of our civilization. We operate in constant evolution, and we bring in innovation all the time, right? So one example that I like to pull with people, because everybody knows it, is driving your car. The first thing you do when you drive your car is you put your seatbelt on, right? We don't even think about it. Well, sometimes we may forget, but cars are now awfully good at reminding you.
Yes.
But it's something that is commonly accepted. But 60 years ago, it wasn't the case. Volvo invented the 3-point seat belt. There were some 2-point seat belts in some cars, but when they came to the moment that they decided to bring in that innovation, they had an invention. They did not have innovation yet. They had an invention. They brought in an engineer to develop that system. They did some tests and some research, and the results were just so amazing that they thought, we're going to save millions of lives with that. But what they were up against is the former narrative, which was, hey, cars are about speed and fun and freedom. We don't want any of your seatbelts here. This is going to kill us. This is against our freedom of choice. And we don't want to ride. And it's, by the way, it's kind of uncomfortable a little bit. And what if the car crashes and catches on fire? You're gonna get stuck. And let me pull some stories to prove that to you. That was the ancient narrative. The new narrative that Volvo needed to establish in their market to bring in that innovation was radically different. So it took them 6 years before the next auto manufacturers decided to also install the system. So that's an example we all know. But if you look around, everything you do, every product you touch is based on a set of beliefs that I call a narrative. When you own a business, when you start a business, even when you are working on a set of features for a product, you need to recognize that you don't just do things randomly. It's because there is a narrative. And if you don't pay attention to this, if you don't orchestrate it strategically, you're going to be up against major hurdles, and you're going to want to work hard, and that's when you burn out.
So, Guillaume, this idea that stories support or create evidence for or against a given narrative, that's really interesting to me, because I would have considered these maybe two different forms of communication. But really what I'm hearing you say is yes, and a narrative is actually maybe hierarchically more important to the set of beliefs, the thrust, the viewpoint. And what I'm doing subconsciously every time I hear a story is I'm either logging that as evidence that the narrative is true, or it may go against my viewpoint and the narrative that I believe today. And I have a choice to make. Am I going to start to shift or open up my mind to that new possibility? Or maybe I'll be closed to it, but either way, it challenges the narrative that I'm living under today. Is that an accurate way to frame that?
So, yeah, that's right. That's right.
So if that's true, I'm curious, how would you connect this set of concepts, which I really love, it's just beautifully crafted how you set the distinction here, with this idea of personal branding? We hear in career a lot, this idea, hey, you need to have your personal brand in your career. And I think most people associate that with story. In an interview, can you tell a good story to a behavioral interview question? Or if somebody asks you, what do? You can give a nice, clear, concise one-liner of the value that you create and why, or whatever. So can you maybe help us understand, how would you describe that idea of personal brand in the context of story and narrative?
Well, I think a personal brand relies on a focus, a big idea. If your personal brand is all over the place, it's, you know, you do a little bit of this and a little bit of, there is no connective tissue in what you do as a job, for instance. Your brand, and I'm not a branding expert, I'm a strategy expert, but I know a little bit enough about brand to be dangerous and to understand that your brand is going to be very fuzzy. People are going to have a hard time understanding what you stand for. And if they're trying to hire you, they're going to be confused, and they're not going to be, it's going to be hard for them to pick you and see where you could be most happy and effective. And so you have to think about it as a thread. What's my brand means, what's my thread, what's my focus here. And I want to take my example. When I came to the United States in 2008, I came with a story, and I came to a new environment, a new context. You could say, hey, I was a new thing in an existing context, which is the United States. I landed in Seattle in 2008. And the first thing I wanted to do is find a job. So 2008, awesome timing to find a job for a French guy who barely speaks English and doesn't know anyone. Super hard, right? I'm being sarcastic with myself. And what do? I, you know, just like any engineer or business person in their mid-career, I put a resume together and I put all my experiences and companies and degrees and so on, and I translate it in English and I start showing it to people, and people look at me with googly eyes and they don't understand. So my stories don't translate. And what I found out years after is they're trying to decode, what's my brand? What is this guy about? And so ultimately, I found my path again in consulting by understanding that people were not interested in my stories because they couldn't make sense of them. What they wanted to know was what was my narrative. How do I function? How do I operate? And in the face of adversity in 2008 with a difficult economy, how did I react? And so what did I do at that time? I went to look for odd jobs. You know, I had a family with one kid. I had bills to pay. And I just became a landscaper. I found a job as a painter, you know, like a janitor in a pharmacy, all sorts of stuff. I had no idea what the connection between the stories was going to be until I realized that what people were mostly interested in is finding out how I survived in a tough environment. That was the narrative that they were after. And then I was able to understand that and really to connect those dots and look at my career and say, oh, I see. I know now how I can organize those stories. I'm not going to make up stories and make lies. I'm just making better sense of them. That's what a narrative is about. And so when you have a business, when you have a company, where are your stories? First of all, you know, there's always this thing like, hey, let's tell our story. What's our story? Guys, you don't have a story. You have thousands of stories, and look around. You got stories on your website. You've got maybe a strategy plan, a business plan. You've got the operations manual. When I work with my clients, I like to print them and I put them on the table and I see, what do you guys see? And they go, well, we see stuff from 50 different companies. And I say, that's your problem. All your stories are completely unorganized and we need to make sense of them. Like, what is this company trying to do? Where are you guys headed? Where are you coming from? That's why I think of stories as a system, first of all. And that's why I like to recombine them. So back to your question, you know, as far as personal branding is, one of the first things I would encourage people to do is start looking in the past. Where are you coming from? What were some of the key decisions you made? What were some of the moments where you struggled? And what were some of the successes? I'm going very, very fast here.
That's good though. I really
just stop me. But and then same thing for the future. So one exercise I like to, you probably know it, is to write yourself a 1 year from now letter, you know, that you will read at the end of the year to go back to what you committed to doing.
It's really good. So I will jump in. I want to share what's striking me and really, how do we put this into practice? And then, you know, where do we go from here? But this idea that, hey, you don't have just one story, really, like, seems obvious. It's kind of stealthy how we fall into that trap of trying to craft the single story that covers everything. And talking to, you know, a group of engineers, a systems mindset towards this would make a lot of sense. You know, you have a system, a network of stories from all different domains of your life, And, how do you put these together into a single thrust, a single viewpoint that takes you towards your vision, your purpose, your intention as a narrative? I think that's a really powerful way to frame that. And I think what you just shared is really aligned in some ways with how I coach my engineering clients as well, where we say, let's go to the past and recount the stories that matter. Let's find the highlights, the lowlights, the places that really shaped you, understand what we can take away from those stories, but then put together a vision and a purpose, the thrust towards where we want to go in the future, and let that be the actual summary that drives us. And I think this is really kind of exciting to me how well it aligns, and I'm seeing some dots connect. So can you tell us, whether you're an entrepreneur looking at your business, if you're an individual leader looking at your life, if you're a director at a big organization looking at your engineering team seeking to start putting this into practice in some way, what are the components of a great narrative? How do you know if you've actually created something here that's going to lead to the outcomes you mentioned, this alignment and acceleration of adoption?
I like to talk about frames, but I think it will resonate with engineers here. And in fact, I have a model. I have a visual model that looks like a 2x2, and there are 4 frames in that model. I organize those frames based on 2 dimensions. One is internal versus external, individual versus collective. So these are universal dimensions. You will always look at whatever you do as you're doing it personally, and then you do it as a group, and you do it for yourself. You've got your internal rules, what you feel even in your mind, in your body, and what you show in outside. So that's the map right there to make your decisions in terms of narrative. And so what I'd like to invite people to do is reflect on those 4 frames. The first one I call the origin frame. Sometimes I will call it also the origin story, but just to be clear here and not confuse people, I'll just call it the origin frame. The origin frame is really what has happened in the past that motivates you to do something you're doing now that you aspire to do. Typically, when I work with company founders, it's the origin story. And you'd be surprised, because I thought, any founders know their origin story. I don't need to rehash that, right? You'd be surprised how helpful it is to them to recount it again and really try to dig into additional reasons why they started the business. I have a client in France who has a sales coaching business. He's been in business for 15 years now, and they just pivoted, and now they're addressing a different market. And one of the things he never told his team is how he started, why he started this company. It's like, I started it because I thought it was important. And I poked on this, I pushed his thinking until he managed to tell me that he used to be a competitive athlete, volleyball athlete. He was massively coached. He was very supported by his team, and he was at a professional level. So that was part-time. And then the other part of his time, he was a sales guy selling products to supermarket chains, grocery stores. And he got into difficult situations selling his products. And he was working for a very large American corporation. I think it was Unilever or something, and never got any sort of sales training or coaching.
Yeah.
And he thought, okay, this, based on that experience, that kind of revolted me. There was a very strong passion for this. I'm going to start looking into this. But then 15 years later, he forgot about it. So long answer, the origin frame. I'll go quickly on the 3 other ones.
And the origin frame is the personal internal. Is that correct?
Yes. Personal internal point of view of why is it that you even decided to, say you work at a big tech, why did you join this team? What triggered you? What excited you? You can't sell anything. You can't create any progress if people don't know why you're excited in the first place. This is ultimately important. For success, it's a number one thing to dig in. If you do something like this in your coaching session, Zach, I applaud you, because that's, to me, with my narrative approach here, that connects, it resonates very well. The second frame, ready to go to the second dimension? Please. The second frame, I call the opportunity frame. And I move to the opposite direction of that quadrant, which is for the collective, aspect of what I do, and the outside, what am I trying to do? What kind of impact am I trying to have? So earlier on in this conversation, I mentioned Volvo. The opportunity thereafter is, of course, create a better company, probably be more profitable, reposition the company. But one of the things that they were really serious about was to save lives.
Yes.
The reason came from the fact that the president had lost a relative in a car crash a few years before. So it was very, very important to him. And they realized that they were pretty much the only car manufacturer with that mindset. And they carved out a place in the market and they rebranded based on that opportunity. So when you say the word opportunity, most people think that I'm talking about the opportunity for their company. Like, we want to be number one. It's all about the company, about us, about, we. No. In that frame, I want you to be thinking about other folks. What is outside? What is much bigger than what you do? If you're working in tech industry here in Seattle, say, maybe you want to have an impact in security, privacy. Maybe it's about the environment, sustainability. And these are the hot topics and the hot narratives that are around us. But maybe you have your own choice, an opportunity that other folks didn't consider, that is completely overlooked.
A lot of examples are popping in my mind, but this idea of making sure that you don't frame opportunity in the context of yourself, but in the context of what are the people who you want to serve looking for. I think that's a really important distinction, how you carve that section out. Yeah, I love it.
The underlying idea here is that I noticed that once you go with that type of message, what you create is people who start looking at you as a movement builder. They start believing in a cause that is bigger than you, and they see that you have an intent to improve your community. So what do they want to do? They want to join you. They want to help you. They want to see you succeed, because in the end, we understand that this is coming back to us.
Yes,
so
I love that.
I can name countless companies here who started with that mindset and that model. We have Mod Pizza here in Seattle, probably familiar in the United States with Mod Pizza. Is a fast-growing pizza chain, opened their 500 restaurants this year. They're about to go public. And they're built on that idea. The same thing, they started in 2008, and they thought, do we really need another pizza chain? Not really. We have so many already, but we would need a pizza chain that create more job opportunities, that create more equity in the job market. And we want to treat our employees better. And so making pizza is almost like an excuse, is what I call the oblique goal. It's like you're shooting for something that is not your end goal. And so the whole premise of this company is the opportunity story. And that's why they do very, very well these days. Okay. They also know how to do really good pizza.
Of course.
They know how to
you still need a great
business.
product, but in terms of creating the narrative, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
The thing that's popping in my mind right now, I'll just share, because I think for an engineering leader, this is relevant. When I was in my career at Whirlpool Corp, there was this HR, human resources phrase about your ability to build followership. And I always heard that word, like followership. Okay, you want to be a leader, so people have to follow you, or you're not a leader if you're just going by yourself, you're taking a walk if nobody's following you. But I never really understood that concept while I was in my career. What do you mean by followership and how to create it? I thought it was an interesting concept, but poorly taught and trained. And what you just said, how it creates movements, that's what popped into my mind. Like, yes, this is the quadrant where the people I want to follow, I notice that this is part of the narrative. And if this is missing, then it doesn't create followership.
I'll go even one step further than followership. Followership to me is an active word, so that's good. But I tend to think that stories have an audience and brands have an audience. We say, hey, what's our audience? If you think about an audience, I picture somebody sat down with their arm crossed and very passive, and I'm taking on a message, I'm consuming a message, but it's very passive. Followers are already active, so that's great. I like to talk about participants. When you're participating into movements, have participants. Companies should have participants. We're seeing now this movement of companies that think of people not as cogs in a wheel anymore, not just as numbers, but participants. They empower them. They want to give them options, authority. Hierarchy is completely thought differently. There is a whole movement started by a consultant called Frédéric Laloux with this idea of teal organizations. I don't know if you've ever heard of that. He wrote a book 5 or 6 years ago on this.
Okay. Man, I want to dig into it so much, but I'm not super familiar. Give us the cliff notes, because then I want to make sure we cover your other frames.
Cliff notes is that the future of organizations is not as thinking as an organization as a machine with a head at the top and a pyramid, but more as a tree, so upside down.
I love that.
We'll
have to do another episode to cover that topic, our organizational development episode. But okay, super excited. We'll put a reference to that in the notes. But
sure.
So opportunity 1, the origin frame. 2 is the opportunity frame, and we went diagonal. Which is number 3?
Number 3 is the perspective, because if you could hear, in the way I'm describing this, there is a start and there is an aspirational direction. Not a destination, but because we don't know, there is an aspirational direction. Now the question is, how do we get there? What's our perspective on this? I went to Google a few years ago. I was here in Kirkland in the suburbs of Seattle. I was invited to do some work and do a meeting, and I'm waiting. And in the lobby, there's this big neon sign that says, focus on the users and the rest will follow. And that became a statement that is fairly popular now in the tech industry. This is one of the 10 Google's commandment. If you type Google 10 things we know to be true, you will come across that document that was written by the founders of Google many years ago. And this is a piece of their perspective. Google believes, at least it was very, very true for at least the beginning, because now there are so many products. It's such a giant company. But it's what started the company with this idea that, hey, we're going to be focused on the user because they will tell us where to go, versus us trying to tell our user what to do. So that's an example of what a strong perspective is. But if you want to generate buy-in, generate success in your career, you got to start forging your own perspective on things. And the number one enemy that I came across was imposter syndrome. Like, who am I to have a perspective and an opinion and a take on things? I'm not qualified enough. I mean, the usual chatter we all have in our head. And so going into that frame is just such an essential exercise to figure out what is going to be the path you recommend. So back to the Volvo example. How could Volvo have reduced the number of deaths, save lives? They thought engineering was their strong suit, their thing. So they came up with an engineering solution. But they could also have said, hey, we wanna lobby for better enforced driving rules. That would have been another perspective. This perspective could have been called authority. This frame could have been like authority, legal something, right? You get me, like putting regulations. Another perspective could have been, we want to teach people how to be better drivers. That's how we're going to go about this opportunity. But maybe they did that at some point. But first, there's strong perspective like better engineering. So looking at your career, start documenting within your team, start writing down a small manifesto of the 10 things you believe to be true. If you like Jimmy John's sandwiches, I do like Jimmy John's sandwiches. Do you like them, Zach?
I do. I mean, they're freaky fast. How can you not like a Jimmy John's sandwich? we digress.
We digress. They have this quick manifesto, and it's not theirs. I think it's Warren Buffett's rules or something like that. But it's there. It's there, and it just shows you what their values are.
I think this is great. So, perspective. It's the personal, how I relate to the external.
There will be collective, internal.
Oh, it's the opposite corner, collective and internal.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. So I was looking at it from the wrong lens. On the opposite side there. I'm glad I asked. I just wrote it in that bucket. A confirmation bias. I wrote it on my paper there and then just assumed without even asking. So what I relate this to is the idea of, in my work now, I would love to be able to just coach all the time, but I also need to go do marketing and share with people my narrative. And my coach is repeatedly telling me, hey, Zach, make sure that you have a point of view. Stand for something. Actually hold a belief strongly enough that it polarizes people. Because if everything you say, everyone can agree with, then you haven't actually stood for anything. Don't be wishy-washy in your message. So that way the people who really need what you have to offer are clearly attracted to it. And the people who really are not a fit for you will clearly be taken away. They're going to be repelled by it. For me, really challenging as an engineer and a person who likes to be liked by everyone. and didn't want to do that at first, but this idea of perspective and holding a point of view is coming together for me. Is that a fair way to say how that comes to life?
Yeah, you could also call it point of view. So point of view is a term that is very, I have a point of view. I mean, we're talking about my point of view mostly in this.
Yeah, right now.
And so consultant, coaches, services business have a point of view. I think product business also have a point of view, should have a point of view. I like to position the perspective of a company on an axis going from, on one end, you could optimize something that already exists. On the other end, of the other extremity of the axis would be, how do you transform, how do you disrupt something? And I think that disruption has been a little bit misunderstood as something that you must do, that you need to transform everything, that otherwise your company is not going to differentiate and not going to survive. There is some truth there. But if you feel too much pressure, if you don't think that you have the next revolution in engineering or in manufacturing, it's okay. What about optimizing something that already exists? I'm working with a company right now that has had this dilemma forever, until we really explored ways that they could feel good about optimizing something that actually already exists, not just turning it upside down necessarily just for the sake of turning it upside down. It has to be something that makes sense to you. I know, Zach, that your point of view is that work and personal life shouldn't be disconnected. That's one layers of your point of view. You have many other layers, but that's one that's kind of struck me. It got me interested in going into your podcast. And so you're not coming up with something completely radically crazy and out there. You're just bringing back meaning to this. And so some aspect of your point of view are transformational, but what I like personally in your point of view is that it's also very much on my optimization axis.
Yeah, I agree.
And it's very reassuring. It's very refreshing to hear that, hey, yeah, you can be human too. It's okay, right? You don't have to burn out. You don't have to burn out. So there is a lot there in the perspective. And I think that most teams, most people don't give themselves enough time to slow down and say, hey guys, what are our tenets here? And it doesn't take 2 months to do. It could be an iterative process where you spend 30 minutes to an hour as a team or alone and write down your 10 commandments. At first, it might not be perfect, but as you go, they will improve.
Really awesome. So take us to the fourth and final frame.
So somebody smart one day said, hey, the purpose of a company is to create clients. I agree with that. To create a client, you have to have a product or a service, right? So the last frame is the product frame or the product story. And I like to bring it last. If you divide my model into 4, it's 25% of the narrative here, because it's the opposite of what pretty much all engineers will do. They will only talk about their product and features and how awesome it is and how it works, and they will geek out for you for hundreds of hours. I'm a little bit of an engineer, and what I do, I built a model, and I can tell you, I can talk about my model for hours and days and days and days, but this is useless if people can't put your product into a context. So the product frame has to be very simple and has to come almost at the end when people understand the context. Whoever created the wheel, I talked about Volvo, again, I'm going back to that example. They had the best product, awesome product, but it took people years to understand it was awesome because they didn't have the context. So the product story should do 3 things: what the product is, what it does, and how to get it.
Yes, really good.
Yep.
In the narrative. The thing with this that's so interesting with engineering leaders who I coach is that obsession with engineers to talk about the products. And I get it. We love it. This is what we geek out on all day. But it shows up in key moments as an unexpected derailer because all you're doing in that situation, take that interview context, for example, if your only thing that you can share with the interviewer is your product part of the frame, you've basically categorized yourself with every other engineer on the planet who has that exact same set of skills and product capability that you have. And why would I hire you? What is it about you that's actually going to differentiate anything on the team? So I think this is super important that you put it last. It's a great reminder for everybody that it's really important. You do need one, a product or service, but without these other 3 pieces of the narrative, you haven't actually given me a reason to buy in.
Precisely. So I show that visually on my 4-quadrant diagram. The way I represent this is that I've got the 3 first quadrant is very, very tiny or disconnected. And then this product that gets so big that it actually bleeds outside the slide. And most people, when they see it, they smile, they laugh at it and they go, yeah, I see what you mean. That's us. Yeah, yep. So the idea is to balance this out. And people always ask me, so should I always talk about my origin story and my opportunity and my perspective before I do demo my product? And I say, well, it's situational. No, it's not a script. It's not, if you have 12 minutes, it's not 3 minutes each. It depends on the situation. It's a skill you need to build to develop which one you will address. But I've seen very good entrepreneurs navigate this really skillfully. Like an interview, the journalist will jump into the product. So they know it's a trap. And so they have to answer to the question, but also start giving people some context, talk about what's going on around, what has changed in the world that is inevitable, that they have to pay attention to. There is science, it's also an art. Just like music, you've got your sheet notes, but then there is interpretation. And that's what I teach the people I work with to do.
I have 100 more questions, and I can imagine the engineering leader listening is gonna want to know more. Like, how do I now put this into practice? What do I do first? But I want to be respectful of your time. I know you've got a client who's going to be waiting for you shortly, and we may have to just schedule a part 2 at some point. But maybe just in the spirit of, we got this frame, we've talked about narrative, the 4 quadrants. If you were going to give 1 or 2 action items, something really to help a beginner to get started, and we mentioned a couple throughout the conversation already, but just kind of zooming out from the whole thing, where would you recommend somebody focus first if they want to begin getting some value from this discussion?
I would say start by writing and journaling, and you need to create material that you can dig through to answer those questions. Do not try to go into, so typical thing people will say is, oh yeah, we need a mission statement. We need 5 values, 5 words. And then, yeah, that comes at the very end. It's like putting a title on a book. First, you write the book. And first, before you write the book, you write a lot of bad writing and drafts, and you throw it out in the garbage, and you explore really what the meaning is for you. And then at the very end of the process, maybe you start thinking about titles. And then at the very end of the process, you decide on a title. The metaphor is the same for you guys. Give yourself leeway, space to really explore those 4 frames. Don't try to just summarize it right away in 1 sentence. And they are very common, very good also templates, and they are like Mad Libs, for clients who are filling the blank. This product is filling the blank. Yeah. You do that at the very end. So first of all, start journaling, start writing, start documenting, record yourself, and look back and look in the pile of stuff you created. What stands out?
Beautiful.
Is that practical?
That's a great practical place to start. Just get that repertoire of content, exploring these 4 areas in your own life. If you're an entrepreneur in your business, if you aspire to be a founder of your own business one day, this is work you can get a head start on before you hire MetaHelm and Guillaume's team to actually help you put this together. So Guillaume, let's land the plane here, man. I really loved this, and I appreciate so much you giving us really a huge amount of value in terms of your framework and the content, but ending in the same place I always end. And I'm excited to hear your perspective on this as a coach and consultant yourself. Questions lead and answers follow. Great engineering and great coaching have that in common. And so for that engineering leader who's been listening today, who wants to create a great narrative, who wants to experience success and happiness and all these rewards in their life, what would be the best question you would lead them with today?
It's a question I've asked myself for many years. I still ask myself. It's an ongoing thing, but here it is. Why is the world a better place, or why is the world better off as a result of what you do? And what you do could be understood as what you do in your job, what you do in your life, what you do with your business. You can interpret that last piece yourself.
I love that. Why is the world better off? Because I'm in it and what I do. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. Guillaume, thank you so much for being here. I know everybody's going to want to explore MetaHelm and this work and hire you immediately, how can they do that?
You can go on the internet.
This invention called the internet. Tell us where.
That we still don't understand. You can go to strategicnarrative.com, and you will end up on my website. And there you have a choice of options, such as sign up to my daily emails that talk about this topic, and that will provoke hopefully some good thoughts for you. And I'm about to release an ebook in the coming days, so it will be available as a free download to really solidify this understanding of what a strategic narrative is.
Amazing. So we'll, again, like always, put those links in the show notes and help everybody get access to you. And can't thank you enough. And truly, for everybody listening, cannot recommend highly enough that you put some energy into this thinking and this work that Guillaume's talking about with strategic narrative, because it really is applicable no matter what your goal is. If it's to one day be CTO, or if it's to be a technical co-founder, honestly, especially for the technical co-founders out there, very notoriously, you're the product guy or girl, and they look to someone else for all these other three key areas. And if you can bring a well-rounded understanding of this to the table and work with someone like Guillaume, it's going to be a huge leg up for you. So please check it out. And Guillaume, thanks again for making time.
Well, you're welcome, Zach. Your podcast is awesome, and I was thrilled to be here today.
Hello, my friend. Zach White here again, and I wanted to let you know that's all we've got for this episode of the Happy Engineer podcast. Thank you so much for investing your time with me today. It is an absolute pleasure to be able to bring you this content. Just as a reminder, it would be amazing if you would subscribe and share this episode with any other engineers you know who may benefit from this. And if you're like me, I hope that you'll take some notes and, more importantly, take action. In our audio version of the podcast on Apple Podcasts and any place that you go to find podcasts, there's a little more content from me about this episode in the debrief. If you really want to hear about how to put this into action, I'd encourage you to go grab that. But thank you for joining us for the video version of our interview today. And again, can't thank you enough for helping us to get the word out about the Happy Engineer podcast and what we're doing. If there's any way we can serve you, would love to do that. Go find us at oasisofcourage.com or reach out to me on social media at Oasis of Courage. And don't forget again to subscribe and click the bell to have notifications of upcoming releases of new episodes of the podcast. As always, I want to leave you with this. If you stay in your comfort zone, you're not going to grow. So let's crush comfort, create courage, and let's do this.